Welcome back to the Disturbed Chronicles. My name's Cams, and as always, I'm glad you're here because today's video we're going to talk about the Jeff Davis 8, also known as the Jennings 8. 8 women were mysteriously found murdered in the Jefferson Davis parish between 2005 and 2009. To this day, all 8 murders remain unsolved. The first body discovered was Loretta Lynn Chesion, and she was found by a fisherman in May of 2005, and she was decomposed in a canal, and it's suspected her body was there for a couple of days before she was actually found. Loretta was partially clothed, and her toxicology report showed that she had high levels of drugs and alcohol in her system, but she had no physical injuries to her body. Due to her body being so decayed, the cause of her death couldn't be determined. However, it's suspected that Loretta died from asphyxia, which means that she was possibly smothered or strangled. Loretta was known to be a sex worker and a heavy drug user. She was last seen at a bar in town with 2 other sex workers, and Loretta was 28 years old at the time of her death. The second body found was on June 18th, 2005, and it was of Ernestine Patterson. She was a 30-year-old mother of 4 and a lifelong resident of Jennings. She was found by a group of friends that were outside hunting for bullfrogs, and Ernestine had her throat slit. She was also partially clothed, but her death was ruled a homicide due to her throat being slit. It was clear that she was murdered, and she put up a fight. Reports say 2 people were arrested for first-degree murder in relation to Ernestine's death, but they were released shortly after due to a lack of evidence. And you'll see that this is kind of a pattern between all of these victims. On March 18th, the 3rd victim, 21-year-old Kristen Gary Lopez, was discovered, and she was also known to be a sex worker and a frequent drug user. But she wasn't reported missing for almost 2 weeks after her last sighting. She was found by a fisherman in a canal, and she was naked. It's stated that Kristen was killed somewhere else and her body was dumped in that area. Toxicology reports show that Kristen had high amounts of drugs and alcohol in her system, and 3 people were again arrested on suspicion of her murder, but they were released due to a lack of evidence. There's that pattern that we were talking about. Now, it's stated that one of the investigators from this case actually bought the truck that Kristen was last seen in the day of her murder. The truck was purchased from a suspect in this case, and then the truck was washed and resold for almost double the value of what it was purchased for. A sheriff from another department got this information, and they were scared that it would fall into the wrong hands, so they reported it to a private investigator, and the investigator was questioned by an ethics group, and they removed him from this case because they deemed what he did with the evidence was unethical. But shortly after, he was placed in charge of the evidence room of that police department. It makes absolutely no sense why they would do something like that. You get removed from a case because of the way that you handled evidence, and then you get put in charge of the evidence room? It doesn't add up. Whitney Du Bois was the 4th victim, and she was found on May 12, 2007 on a road near an intersection, and she was also naked. She had high levels of drugs and alcohol in her system as well, and it was only a day after she had been killed when they found her. But somehow they had even less information about her murder, which is odd because they found her so early after her death. Whitney's family wonders why the police never investigated them. They were never questioned about her whereabouts when they last saw her. They were never contacted about any evidence or anything really involving Whitney's murder. Ultimately, it's stated that this is because of the fact that these deaths weren't taken serious because most of these women were sex workers. The 5th victim was 23-year-old Laconia Brown, also known as Muggy, and her body was found found around 2 a.m. on May 29th, 2008. Laconia was lying on the road discovered by a police officer, and reports say that her body was found close to the police firing range. She was clothed, but she didn't have any shoes on, and her throat was slit, and she was covered in bleach, which was said to be to remove any evidence on her. Laconia's family reported that she had been living in fear for several days before her murder, and she was under the impression that something bad was going to happen to her. And the police found a lot more evidence with this victim than they did with any of the other victims of the Jeff Davis 8, because it's stated they found her just a few hours after her death. Crystal Zeno was the 6th victim, and she was 24 years old. Her remains were found near a canal on September 11th, 2008, which is a terrible day to discover your family member being dead. But due to the advanced decay of her body, they actually couldn't identify her for several weeks. So she was dead long before they actually found her. Some hunters actually reported a foul smell coming from that area, and her death was ruled a homicide, but her toxicology report and her autopsy reports have never been released to the public. Crystal had a husband and a daughter whom she loved dearly, and she was also familiar with several of the other victims of the Jeff Davis 8. The 7th victim was just 17-year-old Brittany Gary. She was the youngest victim. Her last sighting was leaving a dollar store. Brittany is said to have been abducted around November 2nd, 2008, and her body was found on November 15th, 2008, near a grassy area just outside of Jennings. Brittany was very familiar with several of the other victims, being the fact that they were all soliciting and heavy drug users. She actually had a blood relation to Kristen Gary Lopez, which was our 3rd victim. Her family said she enjoyed swimming and hanging out with her family, and she was a very loving person. 26-year-old Nicole Jean Guillory is the 8th victim, and her body was discovered by somebody mowing the lawn near a highway on August 18th, 2009. Her cause of death is said to be asphyxia, and it's reported that Nicole thought she was going to die because her mother actually asked her what she wanted on her cake for her birthday, and Nicole said it didn't matter because she wouldn't be seeing her birthday. And she was right, because Nicole died just days before her 27th birthday. Nicole's mother stated her daughter claimed the police had killed several of the other victims in the Jeff Davis 8, and she knew that she was going to be next. Nicole even placed her 4 children with other relatives just before she was murdered. It's suspected that she was murdered because she knew too much information that was going on with some of these cases, and that she also knew about police involvement in these women's murders. The FBI got involved because they assumed that these murders were from a common offender, and they also suspected that there could be a serial killer on the loose, being the fact that serial killers typically use sex workers as their first victims. And this is because it's believed that nobody cares about sex workers and that they'll be easier to murder and get away with it. But most serial killers don't kill people with blood relation to each other that know each other in any kind of way. Reports say that all of these victims were actually police informants at one time, and some of the victims were interviewed about the other victim's death in the Jeff Davis 8. These women being involved in heavy drugs and soliciting increased the things that they saw and that they knew about, and several of these victims just knew that they were going to die, and they blamed the Jennings police force, but the police stated they weren't sure if the murders were even homicides or if it was the work of a serial killer. For anybody who is interested in following this case deeper, they do have a book by Ethan Brown. It's called Murder in the Bayou, and also a documentary underneath the same name. It's 2025, and all 8 of these murders are still unsolved. But I did read an article that stated that they have a new DNA analysis technology that could help them solve some of these cases. So let's all hope that that is true. A lot of this information I've read about has been from inmate statements or family members of the victims. Several articles talk about how these witnesses were interviewed, and they stated that the police were involved in these murders and that the police were getting rid of evidence involving these cases. It's hard to say if any of this is actually true, but I think we can all agree that something suspicious is happening in Louisiana. The Louisiana Jefferson Davis Parish has a long list of unsolved murders. In 2023, Louisiana was confirmed by FBI's Uniform Crime Report to have the highest murder rate in the United States. And Louisiana has actually held that spot for 35 years. Reports say Louisiana currently has more than 11,000 unsolved murder cases, and a lot of those are kidnappings or missing person cases. 13 of them are in the Jefferson Davis Parish. This is due to high poverty rates, the ease of access to weapons, and heavy use of firearms in Louisiana. I know a lot of people go to New Orleans for vacation and to celebrate or whatnot, but tread lightly because Louisiana is not a safe place to be from the looks of it, especially if you are a vulnerable woman. What do you guys think about this? Have you ever visited Louisiana? And if you have, what was your experience like? Do you believe that the police in Louisiana are corrupt? I know that was a lot to unpack. I just want to give you guys a shout out because we hit our first 100 subs last week, and I appreciate all 109 of you guys. So thanks so much, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you on the next disturbing video.